Well, hi there. Welcome to the theory of multidimensional reality. Oh, wow. I've already gotten started on a good route here. I've got some notes and I was looking at them, and then I thought, well, I better look up determinism. And that led me down a rabbit hole. And of course, I saw some comments. I never look at comments. Every now and then I'll respond if I think I have something, but I don't read them. I just get on and post because I've got too much to do. At any rate, oh my goodness, all the Christian people telling me I'm going to hell and that I look too old and that I'm halfway there anyway. And oh my gosh, the nice Christian things, it just continues to blow my mind. So multidimensional theory of existence. What is it? Doug and his friend and partner, Gary Sultan, back in 1973, were talking about how science could not answer so many questions. And they had a list of them, which I have a list of here. It's on my wall. What is space? If there was a Big Bang, who caused it? What's gravity? What's mass? Why do objects shrink and slow in gravity? Matter has to be waveforms. Why is Planck's constant, which is an energy building block of the universe, why is it? And why is the natural logarithm, why is that involved in everything? What is mass? What causes gravity? What's an electron? An electric? What's a black hole? Light? A particle? Magnetism, time, consciousness, life. So many things that when I was a Christian and that was my main focus, I just thought, well, my goodness, the scientists know what they're doing, right? Not at all. Not only not at all, but we don't have any idea what's involved. So, for a scientist to do research, they have to get a grant. Most of the grants are either come from or approved by guess who, and they have a list. And you can get a grant, but your results are based on what they allow you to say. So it's a sticky thing, and it's very discouraging for scientists, as you can well imagine. And so that's why when I started this research, I started watching a lot of scientists to learn things. And it was so apparent that they were so frustrated and fighting between each other, just like the church, no different. So it is something that surprised me. When Doug and Gary were talking back in 73, they were just frustrated because there were so many things they couldn't figure out because there were no answers in science. So one day Gary said, I'll bet you I can put the correct theory of our universe on a 3x5 card. And Doug and he worked it out until they did just that. And they figured there were two things that they knew to be true, and they went on a 3x5 card. And one was that everything, all things are products of information existing in another time-space relationship or a computer. And number two, that operating system must be God. That's where it would start and end. the operating system, or the Father, or the great creator, whatever you want to call it, thinks us into existence. And when you think about that, forever I use in my speeches that all things are created twice, and that our foundation is so important. What we believe, how we see the world, what kind of lens we see it, that's foundational. So if you're a Christian, your foundation is the Bible, right? And everything, you could like test everything with that. That's your measuring stick. So what is ours? What should ours be, and what has ours been? Well, it's determinism. And that's why I had to look it up. But what is reality? It's what we can feel, touch, see, hear, think, intuit, identify with. What is reality? That's a big, deep question, isn't it? It's what's real, but you can't use the word real. It's what's authentic. It's what's organic. And so how do we know what's authentic or what's organic if we don't know where it began? Some people believe that we come from a comet. And that comet seems to me would almost have had to be self-directed or directed. I just have a hard time thinking that we were created out of just a chance or a hunch, and all of our consciousness came to be. That's a little hard to get. And on the other hand, you know, the Adam and Eve story, I'm certainly not buying. And the Big Bang, the evolution thing, doesn't make sense to me. When you get updated about our origins, I don't want to get off on it because it's a whole nother ball of wax. Okay, so what is the organic world, universe? Where did it come from? Is it rocks? Is it geology? Is it consciousness? Is it an idea? So once we have a theory, we build on it. What is our problem? Well, we can't explain all those things about science, right? And most people never knew there was a problem. They thought science had it all together and the Bible was true. I did. And I was just in my happy little world until I ran into that event on January 6th and decided to do a deep investigation of everything I ever thought to be true. And I did, and I found out nothing I thought to be true was true. Nothing. I promise you. Maybe my name. We were programmed from the very beginning. Think about it. When we're born, we're programmed when to eat. We're programmed about how long will it take someone to answer me when I cry. We're programmed by if we're cuddled or loved as opposed to left. So everything, and those are things that we really have no control over. We're programmed by the DNA of our parents. We're programmed by the time we live in the society or the well-being of that time, the leadership of that time. We're programmed as children how to sort and divide things. You know, what color is this? How do you separate these blocks? And so that leads us to start sorting and dividing and classifying people, which humans have learned to do very well, right? So most of all in the West, when I think about programming and myself, I was born in 1953. I was the oldest of a lot of children, and we didn't have a lot, but we had enough. But my programming was different than most, being the oldest of a lot of children in a small home. And maybe I shouldn't say my upbringing was different than most at that point, but we were influenced by the TV, which had just come out, and we had a black and white one. I remember watching Captain Tug as like being 4, something like that. And we were completely programmed by church and school and our parents. I was very prejudiced because my father was, and I didn't know anything to compare it to, and so I listened to him. And so all through life, we are programmed. Some of it's intentional, some of it's not. The part that I say it's not, we don't know if somebody designed each of us, particularly with quantum mechanics and quantum computing. But the part that is intentional is our education and our religion, both of which are man-made with intent not for the masses. Everything that we've been handed down in the form of religion, in the form of politics, in the form of education, in the form of systems, in the form of colonization, military, all of that was programmed to create in you and me a certain type of people, a kind of people that would be divided. We'd be half blue and half red. Not exactly, but you get the point. We would be religious, but in that, the Protestants would kill the Catholics. It was all set up with an intent. The natives that were here, millions all over, were slaughtered. So from the very beginning, we should have known that this was not a setup that was aimed at being good for you and me. It wanted to be good for us to the extent that we could produce. And that's what we are, the producers. And we get taxed for producing, if you hadn't noticed, but I'm not going to get off on that either. So what is the matter of universe in our world? It's determinism. I looked that up. I asked AI about it. And here's what they say. Determinism is a philosophical and scientific concept that states that all events, including human actions and decisions, are the inevitable result of the preceding events and the laws of nature. In this view, every event is part of an unbroken chain of cause and effect, and given a specific set of initial conditions, only one possible future can occur. Did you get that? This idea has been debated for centuries, with its origins tracing back to ancient Greek philosophers like Leucippus and Democritus. The rise of modern science, particularly the laws of physics developed by thinkers like Newton and Laplace, gave determinism a powerful framework. And so what they're saying is that what Newton's relativity, etc., supported that idea of looking at the world. The central point of contention with determinism is its relationship with the concept of free will. If every event is causally inevitable, then the idea that people could have chosen or acted differently than they did would seem to be an illusion. This has led to different schools of thought. Here are some of them. There's a range. Hard determinism. This position asserts that determinism is true and therefore free will is an illusion. Soft determinism, or compatibilism. How'd you like that pronunciation? This view argues that determinism and free will can coexist. A common argument is that a person is free as long as their actions are the result of their own desires and motives, even if those desires and motives are themselves determined by prior events. Now think about this. Would that apply to habits? So if their actions would be the result of their own desires and motives, would it be the result of their own habits? Okay, and then the next, indeterminism. This is the opposite and holds that not all events are causally determined. It suggests that there is an element of chance or randomness in the universe which could allow for the possibility of free will. There are also various types of determinism that focus on different causal factors. Biological determinism, the idea that our genes and biologic processes determine our behavior and traits. Environmental determinism, the belief that external factors such as our environment, culture, and social influences shape our actions. Psychic determinism, a concept associated with Freud that points out that our behaviors are determined by suppressed, unconscious motives and desires of the past. And then theological determinism, the view that an omniscient and omnipotent God has foreknowledge of all events, which makes all events, including human choices, inevitable. And then there are plenty of sources for that, but I asked AI. So theological determinism is what Christianity is built on. No, it's not accurate to say that. Christianity is based on theological, it's not accurate to say that Christianity is based on theological determinism. The relationship between divine sovereignty, foreknowledge, and human free will is one of the most complex and debated topics within Christian theology, and there are a variety of views, which has caused a lot of war and death and murder and ugliness. Theological determinism is the view that God not only has the foreknowledge of all events, but actively determines every event that occurs, including choices. In this perspective, human free will, in the sense of being able to choose otherwise, is an illusion. And all actions are ultimately part of God's unchangeable plan. This view is often associated with certain forms of Calvinism and Reformed theology, which emphasize God's absolute sovereignty and the doctrine of predestination. Makes me wonder why they'd have to make a priest a god if this is all handled already, but anyway. Predestination. This is the core doctrine in some Christian traditions, particularly Calvinism. It holds that God from eternity has chosen who will be saved, which are the elect, and this doesn't necessarily mean that every single human action is determined, but it does mean that salvation isn't a matter of choice, but of God's sovereign choice or will. And then free will. Many Christian denominations and theologians, including Roman Catholicism and various forms of Arminianism, strongly emphasize the reality of human free will. They argue that God in his love created human beings with a genuine ability to choose to accept or reject him. While God is omniscient and knows the future, his foreknowledge does not cause that future. This is a crucial distinction. In this view, God knows what we will freely choose, but he doesn't make us choose it. The compatibilist approach, a significant number of Christians hold a view that could be described as compatibilism, believing that God's sovereignty and human will can coexist. They argue that the Bible teachings are both concepts simultaneously. They argue that the Bible teaches both concepts simultaneously and that the tension between them is a mystery of faith that humans may not be able to fully reconcile. In summary, while theological determinism and predestination are a significant part of the discussion in some branches of Christianity, they are by no means the foundation of the entire faith. The majority of Christian traditions have long grappled with the question of how God's divine will and human responsibility can both be true, and many affirm a meaningful form of free will. So there you go. Clear as mud, right? So basically tells you that the Bible does not know what the hell it's saying or thinks, right? But every one of them will swear that it's the sovereign word of God. Okay, so when we get right down to it, I've got some notes over here, so I'm making sure to try and stay on track. When we get right down to it, is it mind over matter so that our mind constructs the matter world? Or is it that we live in a matter world and that consciousness is a part of that? So is life, so let's say, is this pen an idea? All things are created twice. So I always saw that as, okay, the big kahuna, the master maker, saw it first, and then it became a creation. And when we have ideas in our mind, that's the first creation. We see it or we couldn't go for it. And so that's the first creation, and the second is the matter form. So the matter and the idea of the matter, are they one thing or are they separate? Am I a complete entity with a body, a biology and consciousness? Or am I a body that is filled by a consciousness? Or am I a body that someone saw into consciousness and into reality, and my consciousness filled it, right? And is consciousness energy? Which I believe it is. So Foster, I've got to note that Foster in 1975 wrote The Intelligent Universe. And he was the first guy that ever came up with, or I shouldn't ever say that with history, because I've never found any of it to be provable or true, because it all contradicts each other. However, we have a note that in 1975, and I can verify this, a man named Foster wrote a book called Intelligent Universe. And in that, he was one of the first people to at least talk about how our reality might be a computer. We might be someone else's AI. We've made it, why can't they? And it would seem like everything is a replication of the bigger. And an atom inside me is an organ, is a system, and then my system is inside a planetary system, and that system is inside a universal system, and it all really looks the same, and when you get down to it, has carbon and the same elements. And when you think of where did it start, so we're in for some fun. This is exciting stuff. So the next part of this is that we are an information reality. Someone wrote our program. I believe that. I believe that it makes absolute sense. And I hope you'll stick around and see what you think. The next part of it, I wanted to keep these like between 25 and 30 minutes each. The next section will talk about analogies of the system, and then why and how Doug proved that it was the correct system. And you'll be able to see what he did, how he did it, and think for yourself, which is the goal of everything I do, to get us to think for ourselves again. Okay, over and out, part 1.